For residents of Western Sydney, the pokie machines dictate and manipulate their everyday life. Western Sydney combines for 9 out of the top 10 clubs in New South Wales according to their pokie machines profit. In Fairfield alone last year, the local RSL collated over $8.4 billion in pokie machine revenue, making a total profit of $130 million. As these suburbs account for some of the lowest socio-economic areas in New South Wales, these alarming figures need to be stopped. And some have even left Western Sydney for country towns such as Murrumbateman to find solace and move away from the lure of pokie machines. And one of those people is Kate Seselja, founder and CEO of the Hope Project. Kate was once a pokie addict whose life was nearly ruined by these machines.
I thought that I'd screwed up everything, and that really drove me for all those years of feeling so overwhelmed mentally, financially, just hijacked, feeling trapped by a power that I didn't understand.
Having to move from Western Sydney to the country town of Murrumbateman, away from the pokies, Kate details how her addiction started, like for most, with just some harmless fun.
I really had no idea what I was playing. I thought it was just harmless fun. And of course I put money in, won straight away and thought, wow, that was easy. And it quickly just kind of hijacked my brain. Really, within about a month, I started thinking about it more and more, trying to figure out how sometimes I won and sometimes I didn't, and what was going on. How come I noticed that I was just pressing the button without really consciously thinking about it, and losing more and more and more money.
Member of Parliament and Greens Senator Justin Field details how the state government is targeting these lower socio-economic neighbourhoods in Western Sydney, resulting in communities suffering serious consequences.
It's also where the clubs and pubs target their machines. It's where they want to put their machines. So there clearly is an effort to target those communities who are more likely to engage in poker machine use, possibly more likely to become addicted to poker machine use, and often those are the ones that experience the most harm because they can least afford it.
I spoke to a family who lost their son from poker machine addiction. He kept wanting to give up and he couldn't, and he was 19, and this one particular afternoon he emptied his last penny into the machine and he went home and hung himself.
That's Jane Manning, director of ABC's critically acclaimed 2015 documentary Kaching Pokie Nation. Jane outlines how the effect of pokies can be very detrimental to the individual, its family and its overall community.
That creates domestic violence, family breakdown, suicide, loss of home, financial devastation. That money going into the poker machines is not going into that family, it's not going into the school uniforms, it's not going into holidays, it's not going into the house, it's not going into furniture. And again, all the businesses suffer.
Kate explains just how impactful her addiction was both financially and mentally for her and her family.
Over the lifetime of my addiction, I lost over $500,000. The shame that I felt of, losing more and more. You can't believe how much money you've lost. So it just keeps you going back and back and back to try and win it back.
Causing her to borrow money from family, Kate says had it not been for living at home at such an early age, she would have been forced onto the streets.
That spurred me to borrow money from my siblings, from my parents, to try and gamble more. And at that point, I was still living at home, so thankfully I still had a roof over my head, I still had food available to me, but had I been living out on my own, I would have been hungry and homeless.
As more and more people are still suffering today, Mr. Field says that the government has not done anything to help people like Kate, and believes that putting a cap on pokie bets will help minimise this problem.
We've designed a system that targets people. We've allowed the industry to create machines that are deliberately deceptive and that deliberately addict. It slows down the throughput, it slows down the losses. That would make a huge difference, particularly to those people who are addicted to gambling machines.
As Sydney's West continues to be the melting pot of pokies in Australia, providing billions in revenue for our government, it seems that we may indeed have more stories like Kate Selger's on the way. Thomas Costigan, Western Sydney Wanderers.